there everybody, this is Robin with Creative2xmom, and in today's video I'm going to be sharing with you what we read in the month of February. So welcome back to my channel. My name is Robin and this is Creative2xmom. This channel is all about homeschooling, parenthood, and thriving in the day-to-day. And in today's video I'm going to be sharing with you everything that I read in the month of February as well as the read-alouds that we did with our kids. Each month I share with you the books that I read personally as well as the read-alouds that we did in our family. We are a homeschool family with a senior in high school, a freshman in high school, and a sixth grader. And it is my freshman and my sixth grader that I do read-alouds with. So sometimes they are fun, giggly stories, sometimes they're historical reads, but we read aloud every day together. So I share those as well. Now, I read quite a few books from the library and I meant to hang on to several of them, but somehow they got returned. So you're going to be seeing a lot of inserted pictures this month. The first three books that I read in February were a side series. They were a trilogy of short stories by S.D. Smith, and these are the Archer books. This is a side story attached to the Green Ember books, and there are three of them. Each of them are right around 120, 130 pages. The first one was The Last Archer, The First Fowler, and The Archer's Cup. And this is a side story that follows one of the rabbits as they are scouting out all the dangers that are happening in the Green Ember story. Now, if you remember, we read the Green Ember books I think last summer, and when we read the first one, that was all I intended to read. I was going to read the first one, and if the kids were interested, I was going to let them go off and read on their own, but I got so interested in it that we ended up reading all four of them as read-alouds. We have a little visitor down here. So when I saw that my library had the side stories, I of course wanted to read those as well. And S.D. Smith is a really engaging storyteller. These are not quite as good as the Green Ember books, but of course being short stories, they sort of have a different feel. They're not quite as in-depth, but they were still really good. I ended up reading them probably in 2 or 3 days very quickly. Fun little extra perspective to the original books, and my 11th grader loved them as well. He was always asking, "Mom, have you gotten the next one yet?" So if you are looking for something fun to hand your kids, or if you're just looking for a quick light read and you loved the Green Ember books, these were good as well. The next book I read was The Peacemaker. This is by Joseph Bruchac, B-R-U-C-H-A-C. I had this originally as a read-aloud a few years ago, and I flipped through it and I wasn't sure I was going to love reading it aloud, but I still really wanted to read it. This again is another book that falls within that. If you look at publishers' lists, they will say, 8 to 12 years. I would probably say 10, 12 might be the higher end, but even up to like 13, maybe 14 would still hold some interest. And this is the story of a young boy who is, his family has left the original tribe because they are peaceable and they no longer want to have this inner fighting where their leader has asked them, he's always challenging them and always telling them that they need to go out and conquer. They don't want that fighting within the tribes anymore. So his family has left and his best friend is kidnapped. That's part of the contention between the tribes, is they will kidnap and adopt young warrior boys. So his best friend has been kidnapped and his tribe has to decide how they're going to protect themselves. Are they going to retaliate? And it is, I think, Iroquois, if I'm remembering correctly. It's the folk tale of how the tribes came together and created this peaceable ally. There are some moments of conflict. They have to go back to their original leader and they're not sure how they're going to be received. And it's just how the tribes came together. I like this one. I think I would include this probably in some sort of U.S. history study. Probably going to hand it off to my he'll be 7th grade next year when we do early American history through Story of the World. Hand it off to my son. The next book that I read was Micro Adventures by Alistair Humphreys. This book book was recommended through 1,000 Hours Outside. In fact, they did an interview with Alistair Humphreys about this book, and it was the recommendation for January. So I was able to grab a copy of it from the library. I have mixed feelings about it. I love what he did. He took the idea of what can you do in a day, because he lives in the UK. It was what could he do in a day or in a weekend, that he didn't have to travel to the other side of the world. He didn't have to travel to another continent, but he could have an adventure within his own area, within his own country. And then he created sort of a guidebook of all the adventures that he did. I think there was about 80 in total. So I love the idea behind it, encouraging the reader to find an adventure in their own hometown. It's sort of like a staycation idea, but maybe a little bit more Amazing Race flair to it. So you're biking, you're hiking, you're rappelling, you're rafting. I really appreciated the idea of finding something local. My hesitance with this book is that it is very UK based, because that's where he is, and so it was fun to look through. There's tons and tons of pictures. It's a great visual book, and he goes into lots of detail. If you are there, he tells you exactly how to do this, where to go, what to prepare for, but again, because I live in the US, it's just not quite the same. So as far as inspiration, it was a good inspirational book if you can get it from the library. But if you're purchasing it yourself, I was really glad that I didn't purchase it myself, because it just was not quite applicable. If you're just looking for inspiration, definitely. And for the photography in the book, the photography was phenomenal. Very, very beautiful, beautiful pictures. But that's sort of my hesitation on that one. Book number 4 in the month of February was It's a Jungle Out There. This is by Ron Snell. I knew nothing about this book going into it, other than it was recommended through Sunlight for one of their high school history curriculums. I got it from our school library, wanted my 9th grader to read it. She totally wasn't interested, and I thought, well, I think I will read it. It's the story of a young missionary kid and all the adventures that he goes on in South America. Some funny incidences. He writes with a lot of humor. I can see myself in these situations thinking, I don't know that I would be so lighthearted, but because he was a kid during all of this, he has a very unique, fun, lighthearted perspective. Very easy read. Couple of typos, could have been edited a little bit better. So if you're looking for perfection in this one, you're not going to find it. But it was a cute story. I think this would be a fun read aloud, but I'm holding off on it because I will probably use this curriculum when my little guy gets into high school. He likes to learn this way through literature, so I would probably hold off and let him be delighted when he gets to it then. Very, very quick read. It's about, I would say, it's under 200, about 160 pages long, and I think I read it in 3 days. Very easy read. When you get to the high school level, this will not be a challenging read for your high schoolers, but it will give them a fun perspective. Book number 5 in the month of February was The Architect. This was a review book for me, so I will link my full written review down below. Basically, it's a middle grades read, and it's written in an unknown time period. You see references to probably the 1920s, 1930s era, but then you also have a lot of like technology where the one boy calls down the screens that he has surveillance cameras all over the city, so he can see everything that's happening. So you're in this weird timeline, and basically it's sort of an allegory about the redemption story about Christ. You have this young girl who's an orphan, and the city's motto is "Don't be out at night when the zephyr comes out," or something like that. Don't be about when the zephyr is out. And everybody's afraid of this zephyr. Well, one night she encounters it in the middle of the night, and she's awakened. She suddenly realizes that everything that's happening in the city is a facade, that these slapstick heroes, if you will, and these villains that they conquer are all fake, and that somebody is keeping the city in fear, and the Zeppelin is actually trying to save everyone. It's her story of uncovering this facade and waking everyone up. It left on a little bit of a cliffhanger, so I think that there will be another book in the future. It was not my favorite. It was a little too obvious. It was a little too in your face of this is all fake, which maybe that was the point, but I like to think that my kids are a little bit more discerning than that. I think they could have handled a little bit more of a challenge. My 11-year-old liked it. I, however, really didn't. So maybe it's just my personal taste, but I felt like it was really too obvious. I will leave the full written review down below. I'm not sure where I really land on this one. Book number 6 for the month of February was The Emotional Lives of Teenagers. This book was a review book as well, so I will leave in the description box below a link to my written review as well. This was written by a psychologist and a mother of 2 teenagers as she explores the emotions, the ups and downs, the ways that teenagers deal with their emotions and everything that they're going through. My pros for this book was that she was willing to share her own successes and her failures from her own parenting journey. As she mentions at one point in the book, she says, you know, I'm a counselor and I should know better, and I have still fallen into these traps myself. This is what it looked like, and this is how I wish I would have handled it. I felt that was really refreshing from a writer to see their failures and what they learned from it so that I can learn as well, and the mistakes that I could possibly avoid. There's a lot of good information in this book, a lot of good stuff. I think my only word of caution was that there are also some contemporary issues that are addressed in this book that I don't think have been fully developed in real life. So she's addressing some things that she sees in her counseling, and she's doing it from a very limited perspective and trying to give advice on that. And it discounts real life experience. Some of these issues discount real life experience from the parents, where she is challenging parents to let their kids take the lead. And I think that that is going to be a mistake. I think that 10 years down the road, we're going to see that as a mistake. So this book, I think, has some really good stuff and some really poorly developed issues that I would just say, yes, it's good. It's good to be aware of these things, but open your eyes when you read this book. Don't take everything she says at face value. And I would really recommend that for any book, but especially for nonfiction. When we're looking for ideas and how to be better parents, we can sometimes just turn the filter off and take everything at face value, and I don't think that is the best idea with this one. Other than that, if you feel like you can read critically and take what you want from it and spit out the ideas that aren't the best, I think if you can come at it from that perspective, this is a good one if you have teenagers. As far as our family read-alouds, the first book that we read was The Door and Wall. We read this one as part of our history curriculum. We are on Story of the World Volume 2, and so we are in medieval times. It was okay. I think it was only about 120 pages long. I was very thankful that it was short. Some of the language and the vocabulary, when the characters are speaking, there's a lot of these and thous and this and the TH on the end of a variety of words. So in that respect, it was hard to read aloud. But then when you get to the narration aspect, it was pretty simple. I would say this is written at probably a 4th grade level, so it was not super challenging to read out loud, but it gave my kids a good perspective into what it would be like as a squire, as this young boy that is recovering from his illness. He goes and lives in the monastery, and then he's been taken by a knight to find his sort of guardian that he's supposed to be staying with. It was pretty flatlined. It gave a good perspective of that historical time period without being too textbooky, but there wasn't a whole lot of rising and falling action. And so in that respect, it was hard for me. It was hard for my 9th grader to stay engaged with it. Would have been a little bit nice to see a little bit more action in that story. But cute story. 6th grader, he loves everything. He thought it was wonderful. So I would say if you've got younger kids doing Story of the World, it's fine. But if you've got older ones, probably a pass for me. And then we started, and this book is going to carry over into March, so I don't want to say too much about it yet. We started The Mysterious Benedict Society. This is by Trenton Lee Stewart, and it's a whole series of books, but we're just reading the first one. If my kids love it, I'm going to let them take off on their own. A word of warning, I put this one on hold at the library. I've actually had it on my read aloud list for multiple years, and we kept putting it off, didn't realize it is nearly 500 pages long. So there are some chapters where there's like a lot of miscellaneous information. We are building, I think we just passed the 300 page mark today. So we are starting to build in some anticipation, I can't say that word, anticipation for what's going to happen next. But there have been some chapters that I kind of was like, I wish they would just thrown that one out because we didn't really get a lot out of it. I feel like I've already spoiled the book a little bit, but we're hanging in there, and I will share more in March. If we finish that one, I'm anticipating that we will finish this halfway through March. So if we have time at the end of that one, we're going to pick up The Arrow Over the Door, and this will be our final historical read aloud for this year to go along with our Story of the World. I will link my video below that has all our read alouds in it, but this will be the next one, and it's going to be a very, very quick read for us. I'm thinking it will tops take 2 weeks because it's under 90 pages. So that's what's coming up for our read alouds in March. As far as what's coming up for me in March, this is my nonfiction read that I just started. It's Outdoor Kids in an Inside World by Stephen Ranella. This is also a 1,000 Hours Outdoors recommendation, and it's the book club book for March. I think that he is going to give some useful information. I'm really hoping he gives some useful information about how to unplug and get outside with kids. So that's all the books that I read in February, as well as our family read alouds. Leave me a comment down below. Let me know, do any of those pique your interest, or what books do you have on your to-read list? I hope you guys enjoyed this one, and we'll see you next time. Bye, guys.